Welcome to One on One. I'm your host, Lee Adamson. Today we're doing something for the first time that I've done in the over 20 years that I've been doing this show. And I'll talk about that in a second. We've done a lot of politics. You know, I like politics. The reason I like politics is because these are folks that are making our laws that are really impacting all of our lives. And you know, over the years, we've had people here running for Allegheny County Council, Allegheny County Chief Executive, state legislature, state senate, United States Congress, the governor of Pennsylvania. We've had a candidate for governor of Pennsylvania. But today we're doing a show about someone that's running for an office we've never done before, and that is for judge of the Allegheny County Court of Common Pleas. Now, our guest today, he went to Penn Hills High School, and he went on to the University of Pittsburgh and graduated in psychology. After that, he went to the Duquesne Law School, and he graduated from the Duquesne Law School, and he is a practiced trial attorney for 27 years. He's a partner in a law firm of Dinsmore and Scholl. He's been a member of the prestigious Allegheny County Trial Lawyers, Academy of Trial Lawyers, and he's lived in Upper St. Clair for 25 years with his wife, Carol, and 3 children. He's received the highest rating from Martindale-Hubbell, and that's a peer-reviewed organization that rates attorneys. I'd like to welcome today a candidate for judge for the Allegheny County Court of Common Pleas, P.J. Murray. P.J., it's great to have you here.
Great to be here, Lee. Thank you.
Now, you've been in Upper St. Clair for a long time. Tell us what it's like living in Upper St. Clair.
Well, it's a great community. There are great people here. Great school system. And that's why we moved here. It's a long way from Penn Hills to Upper St. Clair.
Yes,
so it's literally across the county. But I married a girl from Greentree, and she wanted to stay in the South Hills. And we wanted to raise a family. You know, we're very adamant when we got married that we wanted to start a family. And we looked all over the South Hills and finally settled on Upper St. Clair, primarily because of the school system.
Yeah. And so has it been a good place for you to live?
Absolutely. You know, I've been involved in the community. As you know, you've known me a long time. I've coached in the youth athletics organizations. My kids have been involved in all sorts of things. My wife's been in charge of the PTA, and you know, we've really enjoyed our time getting to know the community and participating and really trying to make sure we contribute back to the community here as well.
And where are your kids these days? What are they doing?
Yeah, my daughter's a junior at Penn State. She's in the honors program there, the Schreier School. She's a junior up there. My son is graduating from a prep school in Connecticut. He's a hockey player. So he graduates this year, and then he'll probably go on to play junior hockey somewhere. And I have a 14-year-old 8th grader here who's trying to take after your son and be a middle linebacker here at Upper St. Clair, or your nephew. Yeah, you're not your son, your nephew, trying to be a middle linebacker here for Upper St. Clair's football team.
So he's going to be playing for Coach Render.
I hope so. He hopes so.
And what a guy that is, huh?
Yeah.
What a record he has.
Well, my background, as you know, we played on some pretty powerhouse Penn Hills teams in the 70s. I played on 4 teams back then, you know, 9th through 12th grade. A lot of people, I think this is a record, the only group of high school kids that ever can stay, they had 4 state championships, 9th grade through 12th grade.
Wow.
Is the Penn Hills High School class of 1980. Because we won, you know, Penn Hills won state championships in 76, 77, 78, and 79. And those were the years I was in 9th through 12th grade. So, you know, I'm proud of that. And, you know, I remember a lot of those things like it was yesterday, a lot of those games and practices, still stay in touch with a lot of the old friends of mine, the old players and the coaches. So when you come out and you're a part of Upper St. Clair, again, another storied high school team and program. It's not so much each team, it's the program. And what Coach Render has been here since 1979. My last year in high school as a football player, it was his first year at Upper St. Clair. So what a wonderful job he and his staff have done. You know, they don't just mold players; they mold young men, and that's what I got from high school football was much more than, I'm not a pro football player, obviously, but what you get from, what I got from playing high school football was character, discipline, hard work ethic, toughness, all the things a young man needs to be successful in life. A lot of it for me came from the things we did as a high school football team, teamwork, having each other's backs, loyalty, all these characteristics that any person of character, of substance, in the community needs to have. I think, and I'm a firm believer, that's what football brings to a young man. And in team sports, not just football, but team sports as well.
I'm a big sports guy, and I think more than just the wins and losses, I'm a big sports guy because of what you just said, the life lessons that they teach a young girl or a young boy that really last a lifetime. Now, when you go back to Penn Hills, who was the coach and who were some of the marquee players some people might know?
Yeah. Andy Obranick was the head coach back then. A couple of guys that would be household names. Bill Fralick, who was the number 2 pick in the 1985 draft. Overall pick, not a second-round pick. He was actually the number 2 pick behind Bruce Smith, the great Hall of Famer for the Buffalo Bills. Was picked first, and Bill Fralick, a lifelong friend of mine, we played Little League Baseball together. He was the second pick. Tommy Flynn, who was a great player at Pitt. He was the WPIAL Player of the Year my senior year. The year before that, a guy named Dan Marino was the WPIAL Player of the Year. And so in the annals of high school football here, we have some great names. Tommy Flynn actually was the best man at my wedding, and we're still best of friends today. We've known each other, since I was 6 or 7 years old.
No kidding. What's PJ stand for?
Philip Joseph.
And that comes from?
Well, my dad was Philip Joseph Murray Jr., and his dad was Philip Joseph Murray Sr. And so when I was born, my dad didn't care for the name Philip. And my mom wanted me to be named Philip Joseph Murray III, and he didn't. And they had a debate and a kind of a negotiation, if you will. And so they arrived at a middle ground, which is they would name, my dad agreed to name me Philip Joseph Murray III on the birth certificate, but he didn't want me called Philip. So they agreed I would be called PJ, and I've been called PJ literally since the day I was born. So even though my name's Philip, I've never ever gone by Philip. I've always been known as PJ.
Interesting. Now, we've known each other a long time. I'll just let you explain how that happened.
We were talking before the show here, and I went back into the early 70s, and you corrected me. It was back in the late 60s we met each other. Our dads were friends. Of course, your dad was a legendary youth baseball coach back in the day at Penn Hills. And legendary, not because he won so many games that his teams did, but he taught kids fundamentals and show up to practice on time, care about what you do, he had some great players and some medium players and some not so great players, like any team would have. But he took every single kid under his wing, whether you were the superstar on the team or somebody that didn't play as much. And he cared, and he wanted you to care. And my dad and your dad were friends, and your dad, in my book, is still a legend out in Penn Hills, is one of the all-time great coaches, managers, guys that took kids under his wing, taught them more than just the sport he was coaching.
Thanks. That's nice of you to say, PJ. I played with your brother,
right.
And you were, I think, our bad boy or something for a while. So
I just wanted to be around.
Yeah.
I mean, even as I can't remember. I think I was 6 or 7 or 8 years old.
Yeah.
And
I remember you. You're a skinny little guy.
I wish I'm not that way anymore.
I remember you.
And I wanted to be a part of it. I was too little to play, obviously, on the team, but everybody knew there was something special there, and that something special was Ace Adams, your dad. He created an atmosphere that people wanted to be around him and what he was doing there. He was one of the first people that coaches back in the 60s would have winter workouts for the upcoming baseball season. Think of that. Well, it's commonplace today. I mean, there's kids working out for baseball and working on sliding and pickoff plays in gyms, in Pittsburgh in the winter. He was doing that in the 60s.
Well, and it's funny though what you say as far as, yes, we had success and all that, but it was way more than that. He was a Pittsburgh policeman. He's teaching right and wrong and the values and all the life lessons that you've learned from your youth sports all the way through high school and high school football and the success you had there. So that's why I still put time into youth sports, because I just think there's so much value to it. And every kid comes from a whole different set of circumstances. Not every kid comes from the ideal, perfect family. And speaking of that, you come from a family that had its own challenges, and why don't you talk about that?
Yeah, my dad was a coach. He helped your dad on the baseball team, but his real forte was football. And he was a football coach. Again, we had some great youth football teams back in Penn Hills when I played. Tommy Flynn was on those teams. Billy Fralick was too big. He was over the weight limit. But, Tommy Johnson that went on to play at Pitt, and Kevin Ewing, who's in the Hall of Fame at Clarion. I mean, really great kids, great players, great families. And my dad got us involved in the Penn Hills youth football program. And the last year that, it was 1974, 75, my last year as a 14-year-old, because I was going into 9th grade the next year, was his last year as a member of our family, really. I mean, he moved out. My parents got divorced right after the season. We had an undefeated season, a great time, and then again, I'm a young kid, 8th grader, 14-year-old, and to have a great football season, undefeated, and then your dad and mom split up was a very trying time for a young 14-year-old. And he was a guy that had a lot of great qualities, but he had some not so great qualities as well. And he didn't pay his child support. And as a dad, you have responsibilities. One of those major responsibilities is to take care of your children financially, emotionally, et cetera. And he wasn't there. And so ultimately my mom had to file a case against him in the Court of Common Pleas to have a judge sign a court order to make him pay child support for his 3 kids. My older brother, Jeff, was at college, and he was 18 by the time.
Notre Dame.
He was at Notre Dame, but so he didn't technically have to support him because he was 18, but I had a younger brother and a younger sister. My younger sister was 9 years old at the time, so it was traumatic, and it was life-changing, to say the least.
So as a 14-year-old and your home breaks apart like this from divorce, what's that like from the kid's standpoint?
Yeah.
I mean, a lot of people say, well, it's hard on the kids. Well, these are the innocent victims of divorce. Divorce, the statistics are through the roof. And so can you talk a little bit about what it was like being a 14-year-old going through that?
Yeah, I'm not going to get into specifics of what was said and what was done.
Right.
I will say this, and I've said it many times before, no 14-year-old should see or hear the things I saw and heard as a 14-year-old. And I'm married now, I'm in my 25th year of marriage, and but it happens. There are very traumatic things going on in today's world in families. And I can tell you from a kid's perspective, because some of these memories, even though it was a long time ago, stay with you. They're life-changing, and you never forget them. It was you lost a lot of sleep. Your grades suffered. My grades suffered. I lost interest in some of the things that, I had to grow up quick. I had to go to work. He wasn't paying his bills. We went and caddied. My brother Jeff and I went and caddied at Oakmont Country Club. I was 14 years old, as a young kid among the fabled Oakmont Country Club. Grown men are earning their living caddying there, and I'm a young kid up there, and it was you grow up fast, and I don't regret growing up fast, because it made me the man I am today. But at the time, it was hard. I mean, my other friends were out riding their bikes and going to the swimming pool in the summer, and I got up in the morning and went to work. Again, it was a character builder for me as I look back on it. I don't regret learning to get up in the morning, go to work, and I had to give my money that I made to my mom. You know, so I made money and came home, and she bought milk and groceries with it. And I can remember days, you know, my mom was a great woman. You know my mom. She's can't say enough about her and how she kept that family together. And she had to go to work. You know, she was a stay-at-home mom, and he left, didn't pay the bills. That made her have to take a job as a bank teller, which she was very fortunate to have. But there were, you know, then she'd come home from work tired, make dinner and make sure the family was taken care of. And many nights she was writing out the electric bill or the gas bill and trying to figure out with what she made how she could make it work. You know, how we were going to eat for the week, the month, you know, and those types of things that I was involved in as a 14-year-old, because I saw the anguish she was going through, and I wanted to comfort her in some way, and she let me in on the circumstances. She didn't pull any punches. She didn't hide anything from us. She told it the way it was, which is another great quality from my mom, was always tell it the way it is, you know, as hard as it might be. So that's something that I went through that I don't know that a lot of you know, people that I know now have ever gone through something like that.
So your mother's had a really big influence in your life.
Yeah, amazing woman.
I mean, to be put in that situation with your 4 kids and now having to pay the bills and not getting the help that she needed, that just must have been just really, really difficult for her.
Not only that, when my dad left the house, she didn't leave him. So her heart was broken on top of it.
So heart's broken, now you're underwater financially, and you got 4 kids.
Yeah, and she had to find a job.
Yeah, and so this is not an uncommon story.
No.
And as a judge, you're going to see some of this.
Absolutely.
Right?
Right.
And so there's a lot of divorce out there, unfortunately. There's a lot of pain. You know, what can you tell, even outside of the judiciary, what can you tell families that are going through that? Did you get any help? And if so, what kind, and what do you have to say to that?
What you have to say is there's a way out. It's possible. It's doable. I'm an example of that. Yeah. And my brother and my sister and you know, you have to focus on education. Education is the number one thing. The number one roadway out of a situation like that is an education. And then it's getting up and doing the things that you need to do, as hard as it might be, and doing the right things, obeying the law, and making sure you're not truant, you're not, you know, and it's very hard. And sometimes there's going to be dips and valleys and peaks and valleys. There'll be ups and downs, like anybody's life. But especially in a trying, traumatic family breakup situation, there's a lot of valleys. And the key to that, those valleys and those dark days, I call them, is to keep your head and your mind on the getting out, getting forward, putting one foot in front of the other, getting through each day. And sometimes it's a day by day existence, you know. And so you can't look at the big picture. Where am I going to be 10 years from now, 15 years from now? I never had the luxury of saying, what do I want to be in 10 years? We struggled day by day, you know, and I come home from work. And the other thing that saved me was youth athletics and high school athletics, you know. And so I would urge kids, families, get involved in something that you like. I don't care what it is, even if it's the chess team or track or field or swimming or the school play, whatever it might be, the band. Get involved and stay active. You make so many great relationships that way, and that's what pulled me through, is the great friendships I had with guys that I played youth football with and high school football with. We formed a band of brothers, and they pulled me out, literally.
They lifted you.
They did.
They lifted you. So that's great stuff from the child perspective. But you know, looking back at your life, it just seems like there's always got to be somebody, some adult, some constant that's got to be there that you can rely on. And I guess that was your mother.
It was my mother, and it was Tommy Flynn's dad. Tommy Flynn's family. And I say this, you know, the Flynn family was
Barney.
a very big Irish family.
Yes.
And Barney loved kids. He loved,
How many kids did they have?
oh, I think they had 10 or
10?
11
Something
kids.
like, yeah, they were so high.
And we lived close to each other. And again, my mom worked. And, you know, when Andy Urbanic called practice or a film session, you weren't 2 seconds late. In fact, it was Coach Urbanic's time, was if you were 5 minutes early, you were late. And so we struggled, you know, I didn't have rides. You know, my mom worked, and so we relied on him and my grandfather. My dad's dad, believe it or not, was a great influence on my life, strong, steady, and you know, and he was getting up there in age, so he could only drive, you know, to certain things. But in a lurch, we relied on him, and a lot, you know, because Tommy Flynn, his dad, Tommy was going to the same practices I was going, the same film sessions I was going to. And so he never hesitated to stop in and give me a ride to or from, and that was a huge help, because we'd have never been able to do it otherwise.
So, if, you know, I guess the lesson there would be if you're close to a family that has broken, and you can lend some help to them, that's always going to be a good thing.
It's a lifesaver. It's a life preserver. I mean, you know, people, and I don't think he realized at the time. He was just doing what he thought was the right thing. He didn't realize, he had no idea what was going on inside our four walls of our house, because we didn't make a public statement over these things. And we went about our business with our heads down, and didn't want to burden anybody. But when you look back over all these years and you ask the question, what were the influencers in your life? And I've had a pretty successful career. You know, I knock on wood, I've had a lot of help and a lot of good fortune. But all in all, I'm happy with my career as a trial lawyer. So
who do you think would be the main influential people in your past that helped bring you to where you are today?
Yeah, well, I'll start with my older brother, Jeff. He took me up to Oakmont Country Club and looked over me. So as a caddy, as a worker, that was a huge influence on me. And Jeff, you know, ended up coaching my Pony League team in baseball. He taught me how to throw a curveball. He taught me how to hit a baseball. And I think a lot of the lessons he taught me, he got from your dad. So he was a big influencer, Mr. Flynn. And then, of course, Coach Urbanic, you know, Coach Gordon, Coach Prannell. I mean, I could, you know, list Coach Gagetta, all these guys that coached me that, you know, and when they coached our high school team, they coached from the standpoint that we were like their sons. There was a lot of tough love and a lot of camaraderie, teamwork, again, all the things I mentioned earlier. And so I would, you know, say those are the, and of course, my mom stands above and beyond anyone else.
And just your mother, just talk just a moment about her, and what did she do to help keep you all together?
Well, the first thing that she always emphasized was education. You know, education and religion. You know, we always, you know, she always stressed, when you're in trouble, pray. You know, and that's because there are certain times she couldn't help. You know, I mean, so she was real big on prayer and education. And those two things, you know,
can't go wrong there.
Pulled me out of a lot of dark days. I mean, again, I say, you know, you look back over your life, and you don't remember the real trying moments. You know, we kind of tend to remember the great times, the weddings, the births of children, the birthdays, and things like that. But you know, when I'm forced to look back, and you know, remember some of those times when I couldn't sleep at night, and you know, she was up crying and things like that. You know.
Well, but a real wonderful woman, and so this situation of being in a broken home and going through all this as a young person, did you have any experience with the court system and the judiciary?
Well, we did. Again, as I said, my dad didn't pay his child support. He, you know, there was a formula then, and I can remember Mom saying, well, he's supposed to pay X amount of dollars. I can't remember what that number was, per child, per month. And then that month would come and go and there would be no money. And so eventually that went on until, somebody told her that she didn't even know that there was an avenue to go. I mean, we were just people, again, ordinary folks surviving day to day. So she finally went downtown, and from Penn Hills back in the days, we didn't ever go downtown.
Right. That was a big deal to go downtown.
Going to East Liberty and East Hill Shopping Center was a big thing.
Right.
So she went downtown, and I remember going into a courtroom. It's so awe-inspiring, so ornate and impressive and official.
So you went in as a kid?
I went in as a kid.
With her?
Yeah. And
so you remember that?
Yeah, I do. And when we left, she had a piece of paper, and it was a court order. I didn't know at the time what a court order was. And she said, well, he's going to start paying now. And so she did this all herself. She didn't hire an attorney or anything. And she's a very simple person that didn't even know where to start. She's directionally challenged, so she couldn't even find her way to town. And it's amazing. It's really amazing when I look back and see what she did and how she accomplished. Because she was determined. She had kids to take care of. And moms, in their innate sense of taking care of their kids, it's a very strong urge. Something you and I will never understand. A mom with her children, the urge to protect and provide is again, it's an overwhelming sense. And I saw it with my mom. She did whatever she needed to do. She sacrificed everything of her own. It was everything. She sacrificed. She had no free time, didn't go out, didn't date and all these things. She stayed home, worked, took care of kids, cleaned our own house. We didn't have anybody come clean our house. I can remember her putting up those plastic insulation, cellophane,
over the windows.
Over the windows.
Yeah.
So our heating bill would go down. It's just things like that you remember, that I know that she really was determined to pull our family out of this situation, and she did it.
And so, has your childhood? Do you think it's affected you in the kind of father you've been and want to be?
There's no question that has. There's a couple of things that I got from that situation. Number one was I didn't want to be like my dad. So, it's sad to say this, but most kids boys want to be like their dad. They want to tag along with their dad. I didn't. I didn't want to be like him. So I was very determined to not be the kind of guy my dad was. So I was never going to, do the things he did to my mom. I was never going to not show up for things for his kids, leave the family. Very determined. And I was going to always make sure I had employment, and could provide for my own family. And I wanted to have a family. So I took the opposite approach. So my dad's not here anymore. He's passed away. But, I took and he helped me in this regard, in a strange sense. He helped me learn how not to be as a dad. And so I learned as much that way as I did as somebody would learn how to be a dad from their dad, if that makes sense.
Yeah, and it's funny, PJ, because you majored in psychology, you graduated in psychology, and a lot of psychology books say that boys get their life, can get their life force from their father. I certainly did, because I looked up to him, and he had so many wonderful values and qualities that I know are still with me today, and I thank him for that. However, so you have a father that does this. So how do you reconcile that, and how do did you have to just make a complete turn?
I kept it all inside me a lot, I had a very silent, strong determination. I didn't want anybody to see
the pain. Yeah. And sports was an outlet.
Yeah, it really was. And, and I always, it's cliche, but in my young mind, I wanted to be a winner in life. I didn't want to be a loser like I thought my dad was. So I made in my young brain, there was a difference between a winner and a loser. and there was really nothing in between. And I always, looked at it that way, started looking at it that way because, and that, and going back to your other question about the court, what the court did that day and signed that order, I saw right then and there, wow, there's a guy, a judge sitting there that literally changed our lives with one stroke of his pen. And the relief on my mom when we left changed changed the whole dynamic, because then he did start paying his child support. So I'll give him credit in that regard. But a court can bring that to a troubled family that's got a case there. That's what judges do. Judges aren't always rendering sentences for murderers and things like that. Judges have to be compassionate and understanding. They bring their own life experiences with them to the bench. My life experience is unique, I think, from a judge's standpoint, in the fact that I was there. I have a perspective of families in trouble and the struggles and the pain and suffering that they're feeling, and what may explain some of the reasons why they may be there in the first place.
So how ironic is you're a young boy walking in the Allegheny County Court of Common Pleas, and your mother's struggling, your family's broken, and that judge does make a judgment to help your family, and now you're running for that position. It's kind of ironic, isn't it?
Well, I just feel like it's what I'm supposed to be doing, Look, like I said, I've had a great career. I've never been out of work since my first year in law school. I've always had a job. So not a lot of lawyers are that fortunate. So I've been very lucky in that regard. I've worked very hard. And I just feel like at this point in my career, it's time for me to lend and support and give back and contribute my perspective as a judge, to make sure that I'm contributing, because I think I have a lot to contribute from that perspective too, especially the family court.
PJ, it's interesting that we talk about this, because not everybody gets to experience the Court of Common Pleas. You did, and I did, and I'll just tell you briefly what it was. I thought my kids grew up in the South Hills, they had a good life, and I thought, I want these kids to learn how to give back. So it was my idea to come up with this idea, we're going to be foster parents. So we go through all the classes and all the clearances, and we become foster parents, and we bring a couple of foster kids into our family. And I had to take these girls to the Court of Common Pleas, the family division, and sit there and deal with the mess that was in front of us.
Right.
This is some real mess.
Right.
And I have to tell you that those judges, the several judges that I dealt with were just absolutely outstanding. And I just walked away with a lot of respect for those few judges that I dealt with. So you're absolutely right that a judge in that position has such influence over a family that really needs help.
Yeah.
And is that one of your drivers?
It is one of my drivers. I'm very compassionate in that regard. I really believe that judges must be compassionate, because look, the only times there are happy moments when you're in front of a judge is adoption, or the foster child situation where kids are granted custody, you're granted custody, which is a lifesaver for those foster children. So I give you a lot of credit for that. You've saved a couple lives yourself. And weddings. Everything else is a negative experience. Somebody's being charged with a crime, somebody's sued or getting sued, a family's broken up, juvenile crime has been committed. There's just so much negativity when you're in front of a judge that you've got to be compassionate. You have to be firm. You have to make sure that the law is enforced, but at the same time, you've got to have some compassion.
And that goes back to the tough love that you learned in sports through Penn Hills High School, right?
Yeah, oh boy, I tell you what, there were some tough days on those practice fields. I can tell you, I never thought I'd get off of some of those practice fields. That's how hard it was.
Yeah. So what made you go into law?
It started with my experience there
Interesting.
in the Court of Common Pleas. And, you know, as an athlete, an ex-athlete, you're a competitor. You know, to me, I loved competition. And so as I was, I guess, sort of muddling my way through the University of Pittsburgh, it dawned on me that I was going to graduate in a couple of years, and the time was marching forward at a pretty rapid pace. So I began to think about how could I channel my competitiveness into a career. And it seemed obvious to me, you know, I'd taken some law classes at Pitt through the psychology program, law and psychology, and the psychology of juror deliberations and things like that fascinated me, you know. And so I began this almost now half-life fascination with trial work, with a trial lawyer. And so I married up my competitive nature with what I thought would be a career as a competitor, a trial lawyer, because a trial is a competition. It's not physical, it's mental. And it's you know, one side against the other side, and you present your facts and your witnesses to a jury, and the other side presents their facts and their witnesses to a jury, and the jury decides the winner. And so that's, you know, what I wanted to do. I wanted to continue to compete. My football career was over, and that's where I started.
And so what type of law did you go into, and what type of law have you been practicing?
Yeah, it's all about opportunities, you know. I did well as a student at Duquesne, and I made it on the law review, which is reserved for the top, I think it was 15% of the class. So I made it on the law review, which puts me at the top of the class. And you know, a lot of the big law firms and the judge clerkships come from that law, from the students that have made law review. So when I made law review, that opened up some doors for me. And one of the doors that was opened was, when I graduated, was a clerkship with a federal judge, a trial judge, a 2-year paid position. It wasn't paid a lot of money, but it was more money than my mother ever made. So I worked for a federal judge named Baron McCune. What a great judge name, Baron Patterson McCune. He's from Washington County, and he was a federal judge. And I worked for him and studied under him, and you know, wrote bench memoranda to him, trying to convince him you should rule this way or that way. And of course, he was the ultimate decision maker. And I watched a lot of the trials that went on in his courtroom. And these federal judge clerkships are competitive positions. In other words, there's a lot of applications for very few positions. You know, there's probably 50 applications for one job. And I was lucky enough to get one of those judge clerkships. And again, once you have those clerkships, another door opens. The door of the big law firm in the city. And I was, again, I'm not independently wealthy. I'm not, you know, my mom was done providing for me at that time, so I was on my own. So I had to find work. I had, you know, loans I had to pay back. And so I got a job in one of the bigger law firms in the city called Thorpe Reed and Armstrong, and started my career there. And we practiced civil cases, you know, complicated cases, non-compete. You know, go to work for somebody and you sign an employment contract, and in it has a clause that you won't compete against your employer if you decide to leave. Well, that happens. People get better job offers. They have non-compete clauses in their contracts, and then a court case is filed to enforce that clause. You know, the biggest example, you know, I've never had this case, but you know, you talk about enforcing what we call trade secrets. And so what's a trade secret? And the best example is the formula for Coca-Cola is a trade secret. Nobody knows it, only Coke knows it. So if somebody would have that formula and they worked for Coke and they left and went to Pepsi with this secret formula for Coke, they would get sued for misappropriating or stealing or taking away a trade secret. So we do those types of cases. Construction cases, where a huge building is built and something goes wrong for whatever reason, and then you have bunches of subcontractors. There may be an electrical subcontractor, a plumbing subcontractor, a cement flooring subcontractor, a roofing subcontractor, mechanical, heating, air conditioning subcontractors. And so the owner has something goes wrong with the building that he just paid to have built. So he sues all the contractors, the general contractor, and then the general contractor sues the subcontractor. So you end up in the massive litigation. It gets pretty complicated.
So a lot of civil work.
Civil work.
And then you were with Thorpe Reed for how long?
I made partner there in 7 years, which was a pretty quick turnaround there. And I was there from 1990 till 2007, so just about 17 years.
And then you moved?
Went to Dinsmore and Shoal, which is a bigger firm, again, a bigger platform with more lawyers, and it was a little bit more money too.
I see. So it's been a good professional career you've had.
I've had a 27-year career now that I'm proud of. I'm very proud of. I'll put my record up against anybody's.
And you are running for judge because of, I'll let you put it in your words.
Yeah, I want to contribute. I think I have something to offer. And again, I go back to my days as an athlete. You always want to contribute. I moved in here to Upper St. Clair. I wanted to contribute to the community. The chair of the Civil Service Board. I've coached baseball and football for many years. And as you started 2 public foundations, charities, I always want to contribute to my world, my country, my state, my city, my county, and my home, and my town. And now I think it's time for me to contribute back to my profession. That profession's been very good to me. I've had a lot of doors open. I've been very fortunate. I've worked very hard. And now I think it's time for me to give my experience, knowledge, and life story to better use as a judge that can contribute back, again, making a meaningful contribution to the profession, to my hometown, the city that I live in.
How did you become a member of the Academy of Trial Lawyers, the Allegheny County Trial Lawyers?
The Academy of Trial Lawyers is a professional organization made up of trial attorneys, obviously, in Allegheny County. It's invitation only. And I think there are about 10,000 lawyers in the county. The Academy is limited to 250. And it's, very competitive to become a member. You don't necessarily apply for it, but you make it known that you would like to be in it, and then they research your background, and they research your career and the cases you've tried. You have to have had, I don't know the exact numbers, 15 or 25 trials in your career, minimum. And you've had to have presented 20 or 25 days to a jury, trial days to a jury. And in the civil world, not 95% of the cases settle, so you don't get opportunities to try a lot of cases, but I have had those opportunities. So I've, again, lucky to have gotten to fulfill my competitiveness in front of juries, in trials. And so when you narrow down those parameters, the Academy selects the top, what they think are the top trial lawyers. And they have hours of interview. They ask you about your cases, and they go off then and ask the judges who presided over those cases. Was he a good lawyer? Did he do a good job? It's all about quality, not quantity. So I'm very proud of the fact that they've invited me into their organization, because that tells me I have a very high standard of work product. Because they don't just, like I said, every trial lawyer in a city wants to be in that organization. They're very selective.
So you've had a successful law career. You want to give back and contribute to the community to be a judge. So now you decide to run for office, and that's a whole different ball of wax. Let's just talk about that and what you've learned through all of that experience.
Yeah, we could be here for days talking about that process. I'm not a politician. I mean, you've known me now for 45 years or something like that. I never wanted to be a politician. I never wanted to run for legislature or anything like that. But I did want to be a judge for the reasons I just said. And so there's two ways to become a judge: is be appointed as a federal judge, like the guy I worked for, Judge McCune. That's a presidential appointment. And again, that's almost as political as literally running for office elected. So it's very political. So I had to be a politician if I wanted to be a judge. And so when I first started, I met, actually I met State Senator Sean Logan at the time, who worked at Thorpe Reed before he became mayor of Monroeville and then into state senator. So I knew him, and I went to him and I asked him to help me. And so when you start to down the road of being elected a judge at Court of Common Pleas, you need to have people that help you because the system is so convoluted. In other words, I run as a Democrat and a Republican. So judges run on both sides of the ticket. You might say, well, when we elect Republicans or we elect Democrats or independents or something like that. Well, it doesn't matter what you are as your party affiliation, because if you get 500 signatures as a judge of the Court of Common Pleas of Democrats, you're on the Democratic ballot. If you get 500 Republican signatures, you're on the Republican ballot. And the reason that is because the job of judge is apolitical. In other words, once you take that road, politics goes out the window. So you're a politician to get elected. The minute you're elected, you're no longer a politician. You're somebody that is there to enforce the law and, you know, make sure justice is served. So going back to how does this whole thing start, you know, the Democratic Party has more registered voters here in Allegheny County than the Republican Party. That's a fact. And so, generally speaking, Democratic candidates that win the Democratic primary will be elected in the fall. And so there's a process to become the Democratic primary winner. One of those processes is getting endorsements. And there's a number of endorsements. The two major endorsements are the Allegheny County Democratic Committee, which is made up of every community in the county has its own Democratic committee. Some are bigger than others based on the population of registered Democrats. Like Upper St. Clair doesn't have a large Democratic committee as opposed to the 19th Ward in the city of Pittsburgh, or Penn Hills. The biggest Democratic committee in Allegheny County is Penn Hills, ironically enough. And so I was able to meander my way through that process with a huge help for the Penn Hills Democratic Committee and others.
So you have a lot of endorsements. Who are they from, and why are they important to the basic voter out there?
Yeah, a couple of the endorsements I have. The Allegheny Democratic Committee, you know, which is one of the major ones. The Allegheny County Labor Council, which is made up of all the leaders of various organized labor unions. And those are the two major ones. I have the endorsements of, you know, County Treasurer John Weinstein, who's chairman of my campaign, County Executive Rich Fitzgerald, and a lot of, you know, State Senator Matt Smith, a lot of elected officials. And it's important because the average voter doesn't know one judge candidate from the other.
Right.
I mean, you might see a name on a ballot and you say, I don't know either of them. And there might be 10 people on the ballot and you don't know a single one of them personally. So how do you make your selection? And the way you make your selection is, if you're a registered Democrat, who does my party think would be the best judge? Who does my state representative think would be the people that I've elected in my part of the county? Who do they think? You know, if you're a member of a labor union, if you're a plumber, for instance, you're in Local 27, the Plumbers Union, another supporter of mine, you go to your leaders in your union, because they vet the candidates. They interview them. These endorsements, you don't pick people out of a hat. You don't roll the dice and whoever gets a 7 is the endorsed candidate. The endorsement process is research, not unlike the Academy of Trial Lawyers. Research. What's your temperament? Where do you come from? How do you think? What are some of the cases you've worked on? Are you qualified? Are you experienced? Will we trust one of our members that's in front of you for whatever issue that one might find themselves in front of a judge for? So you go to your leaders that are paid, and part of their job is to research candidates and then tell their members, here's who we've selected. So that's why endorsements are important. The party tells the average voter, this is who we have researched and think is our best candidate or candidates. The labor unions do the same thing. The elected officials do the same thing.
So if elected, what kind of judge would you be, PJ?
Well, that's a very good question. There are 3 divisions in the Court of Common Pleas. The family division, what we talked a lot about earlier. The civil division, where I practice a lot of my career. I've practiced many years in the civil division. We hear civil cases. Then there's the criminal division, the division that we read about most in the paper, when there's a murder committed or a robbery or a theft of something. That get the headlines. Those are criminal division judges. Civil division judges preside over civil cases, the cases I just talked about. And the family division judges preside over cases like we were in front of with my mom. And then the juvenile crime cases, when a young juvenile commits a crime, they go in front of juvenile judges.
So when somebody wins this election, where do they generally end up in those 3?
Yeah, they end up where the president judge assigns them. And historically speaking, it's you start in the family division. I don't know why that is. I have no problem starting in any of the divisions because I'm a quick learn. If I'm successful in the election, I will study whatever it is. Criminal law is probably the least familiar, but I will study it and learn it just like I've learned how to practice law. So, but generally speaking, you'll start in the family division, which again will come full circle for me if I ended up as a judge in the family division.
So people go into the voting booth and some people just pull straight Democrat, some people just pull straight Republican, which I'm not a big fan of personally, but that people do that. They look at the judge candidates and they're not sure, they don't know these people. They have no idea what they stand for or what this one stands for, but they have to vote for a few of them. So when they walk in that voting booth and see PJ Murray, why should they pull your lever?
Well, I would hope they have done some research, and it's just not, now with the computers and Google and those types of things, you can find out who your party's endorsed, who your state reps endorsed, who your labor unions endorsed. So I would have hoped the voter goes in not looking at that list of candidates having not done any research at all. Because if they have, I don't know why they would pick PJ Murray if they've done no research. Maybe because I've got initials in my name, it's an Irish name, I'm from the South Hills. There's a whole myriad of different reasons. Hopefully they've seen some of my commercials and read some of the literature that I've sent them in the mail. They've talked to their, like I said, state rep or state senator, county executive, county treasurer. But if they have done the research, the reason they would pick PJ Murray is because I have the right qualities, the right temperament. I come from a background that lends itself to conveying to people in dire circumstances, there is a way out. I'm living proof of it. I did well. I was top of my class. I've worked in the best law firms. I've been trained, and I certainly will never forget what it's like to be a lawyer or a party, a party in those proceedings.
Across this world, there are people that would do almost anything for the right to vote, but yet we have that in this country, and some of us take that for granted. So I don't think we should take that for granted. I think it's one of the wonderful things about this country. But like you say, do a little bit of research before you walk into the voting booth, and it'll help you make a better informed decision. It just makes a lot of sense. I really I just want to say it's been so nice to have you here on our show. We've been doing this show a long time. We haven't talked about judges or county court of common pleas ever on our show. It's great to have you here, especially knowing you for as long as I have and knowing your family and the career that you've had. And I wish you the best of luck in your search to get there. And good luck to you, and thank you so much for joining us.
It's been
today,
a great
PJ.
pleasure. You've been a great friend for many years, Lee. The feeling's very mutual, you and your family, and best to your nephew. I like him to go to linebacker U or Pitt, my alma mater. So I could keep him close to home. That would be, put a plug in there. So.
Well, thank you. Well, thank you, PJ, for coming, and good luck to you.
Thanks, Lee. Appreciate it.
And I want to thank you for. I hope you enjoyed this today. Judges do have a big influence on families, and I think it is very important. I know a lot of people do just walk in that voting booth and start picking name recognition, and I think it really does make some sense to do a little bit of homework. And I think if you do some homework, you're gonna find some good things on all kinds of sides of the aisle. So again, thank you for watching. Please join us for another edition of One on One. I'm your host, Lee Adams. Take care.